Hey everyone, I've got Lisa Philyaw on today, and I'm so excited to chat to her because she's got quite the story to tell. So we're going to get into all the good stuff today. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Great to be a part of your podcast. I'm glad to get to support and share.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Now, we have only really briefly met, but I definitely, I'm inspired by and very curious about by, I suppose, the work that you do and your story. So I'd like to ask you to firstly start off with, please introduce yourself and what do you do?
Would love to. So I am a career confidence coach. And if I were to give it one sentence, what I do is I help people do their work in their own way with soul.
Wow.
What that means
Cool.
is, it's really about connecting with that full self, not just being in our head all the time or on an emotional roller coaster all the time or people pleasing all the time, but getting in touch with who we are from that self-confident place so that we can show up and we can own our career and create it in a way that feels good to us, that's soul-led, that's heartfelt, and that really just inspires us to continue forward.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, in terms of, for you to be able to bring up those really juicy words, like I love it, like the soul, the heartfelt, the showing up and owning yourself in your life. It must have come from somewhere as well, from maybe a personal experience. So I'd love to ask you, I guess, like, where did this journey all start for you?
Yeah, I was my own first client is the way I think of it. And it actually started, it was the night before my wedding and I couldn't sleep. And it wasn't just a general, oh, I can't sleep. It was full blown panic, which is probably natural for a wedding, jitters. But it got to the point where I was getting so mad at myself because I was just thinking of all of the work that had been put into this event and how I was going to be ruining it for myself, for others. I was a dramatic mess. And it was quite awful. It just from an emotional standpoint and how I was treating myself just in my own head. I didn't sleep the entire night. The wedding went fine. It was beautiful and lovely. And so I have no regrets with the wedding day. But what that set off was that was the first time that I experienced intense sleep anxiety. And after that, every other time I had a big work event, I would be worried it would happen again. And it's kind of like the self-fulfilling prophecy. You are concerned you're not going to be able to sleep. Guess what happens? You get anxious. And when you get anxious, then I would think, oh my gosh, it's happening again. And so I would vacillate between this deep anxiety about not being able to sleep and then this deep frustration at myself for making something that didn't have to be a problem into such a big deal. And I would go back and forth in these different roles from anxiety to frustration at myself. And it just got to the point where I actually considered switching jobs because I felt like I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the pressure and I loved my job. I just couldn't see how I was going to be able to go forward if this was the panic that would ensue every time I had an event. And I was a trainer. And when you're a trainer, you're doing a lot of meetings. So this happened quite frequently.
Yeah. Give us a sense. I mean, it sounded like there was that cycle of anxiousness and frustration and then not being able to sleep. Like it's something that I've been through myself before. Yeah. So that can be, like you said, self-fulfilling prophecy just goes around and around. But that pressure that you mentioned, give people a sense of like, what kind of pressure were you under?
So to be quite frank, a lot of the pressure was just self-imposed. Me thinking if I didn't show up fully, my boss would be disappointed. I wouldn't be given new opportunities. I worked in a consultant company in a leadership training type of area. And as a part of that, I would be leading teams through a personality assessment, helping them with the team dynamics with that, or I was presenting to a board. And so there was pressure in the sense of not wanting to let the client down or my boss down or my future career being at stake from all of this.
Mm.
And it was a mounting pressure. And it didn't just stay in my work life. It started to trickle into my family life as well, where I was turning down invites to bachelorette parties or family things because I was thinking about the sleeping situation and how if I couldn't sleep, how it would cause so much issue. And I was so ashamed of it as well. I didn't want anyone to know.
So how would you, I guess, like, how did you cope during that time with all of this pressure?
I tried a lot of different things. And the first thing that I did was a lot of actions where I changed my sleeping schedule. I got special glasses to try to block blue light. I took more melatonin. I went to the doctor and got a sleep prescription for sleeping medicine. And I tried all of these action type of things, and they would work in the short term, but then I would start to think, what if they don't work? And as soon as I thought that, I would get anxious again. So what I ended up having to do was I got some therapy, and that really helped me understand more about the problem. But then when I was talking with the coach, I remember the sentence she said to me. She said, Lisa, what if not sleeping was not a problem? And I didn't believe her at first. It seemed silly because we all know we need to sleep to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing her say that allowed me to open up this possibility. And I learned how to process my anxiety. I learned how to just sit in bed and direct my mind to focus on my body. So when my mind started to take me down all these what ifs of what could happen if I couldn't sleep, I would redirect it and say, okay, mind, I hear you, and we're going to just focus on the body. And I would just describe to myself what the anxiety felt like without the story that came with it. And I kept bringing my brain back to saying, okay, my heart is beating. Okay, my cheeks are flushed. Okay, I'm feeling like almost like I'm vibrating because there's so much adrenaline in me. Okay. And I would just describe it as if there was nothing wrong. It was just like the weather forecast. And I would just over and over do that. And it helped me to not go down all those stories, to refocus on where I was at. And then when I couldn't sleep, it didn't become such a big deal, which ironically lets you fall asleep because you're not making it into a story.
That really speaks to me, because a lot of the times I think that with, like, say, anxiety, that particular problem, sometimes when people identify with it, within themselves, then that becomes, like, that's all, they start to behave and just become that particular problem, rather than dissociating it and going, well, this is the problem. It's not my problem, but it's the problem. And having to, I guess, work with it, just like an external entity,
I love that phrase, external entity. Yeah. Because I think we say I'm an anxious person, but you're not a feeling in itself. You're having that feeling. It's that separate entity, like you were just describing. And that helps you to not own it as who you are. It's just what you're experiencing.
Yes, correct. And so it sounded like that what you were going through is really working out, or like giving it an exercise, like that event that you were doing. I mean, was that something that you had to do like on a nightly basis? Like, did you have a very specific routine about it, or how did you go about like that process?
I, in the beginning, did do it nightly, and it wasn't like a ritual routine. It was as I noticed the anxiety come up, I would do it nightly. And on the nights where the anxiety would come up. And at first it felt really silly. And I remember if for those people who are into journaling, I remember journaling, and I actually have a journal entry from that time period in my life where I was describing how I felt and my wish, like my dream or the goal that I had about being able to sleep and not have that be an issue for me, and that being fine. And I remember how impossible that it seemed like that would be. And yet here I am now, and sleep anxiety is not a problem. I don't have nights where I can't sleep. And I know even if I did, it's fine, because it truly is not something I see as a bad thing. It's just, okay, I'm awake. That's what it is.
Mm.
And so for me, it was at first that nightly thing. And then also what I would have to do is catch my mind, because it'd be like a week before an event and I'd already be putting out there that, oh no, I'm not going to be able to sleep. And I'd have to catch it a week ahead also and be like, you don't need to put that out there right now. Let's focus on where we're at now. It's okay if you can't sleep then, but we're not even to that day yet. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, you touched on a really important point in that the timing as well is really important when it comes to anxiety, because there was a time when I was feeling the same thing. And my coach also, she showed me a picture, and the picture was an infinity sign. And what she put on there was that when you feel fear or anxiety, that is something that, because you're sort of projecting that into the future, that there's an event or something that hasn't happened yet, that's where, if you're thinking about that, that's going to bring up the feelings of anxiety. If you're in the past, if you're thinking about the past on the other spectrum, then that's going to bring up depression or things that, when you're ruminating on the past. But when you're in the middle, in like the infinity symbol, you're in the here and now. And when you're in the here and now, there isn't any problems. So that's sort of what you reminded me of.
Yes. And it's so true. Where you're at right now, there's never anything wrong, because it's just the moment that you're in. Even if you feel anxious, which in the now you might feel anxious, but it's never about the now. It's about what you're anticipating. Mm-hmm. Even if it's 3 minutes from now, like public speaking, people are most anxious in those like 30 seconds to 3 minutes before they talk.
Yes.
But it's still the future, just like you said.
So where your mind goes.
Yeah.
So in terms of this, I mean, the sleeping side, you mentioned it, like sort of, it started from the wedding. What with the anxiety side of things, was like, did it ever start before? Like, were you, I guess, prone to anxiety before like events? Because I'm just curious.
Yeah, great question. And yes, it had never been sleep anxiety before then. So that's kind of what started it to take that route. But before then, yeah, I did experience anxiety in different jobs, different school, and I would always make up for it by working harder. I always knew that I could, for the most part, overcome things by just working that much harder. I never felt like the smartest in the room, but I knew I could have the best work ethic. And that's where I got stuck, because there's only so much work you can do to where you then run out of time. So
and
there's
energy.
a point, and energy. Yeah. There's a point where that strategy is a physically impossible strategy to implement, and you need another way. And the other way is around your own mindset and the energy that you're bringing to yourself and what you do.
Yeah. Okay. So when it no longer works, so working harder, even like I remember that's a very common strategy especially for high achievers, right? Because, like, I think, well, it depends on your background, but for some people, that kind of hard working ethic is like, that hustle is a mentality, and it's been embodied. And it's sort of like, sometimes it's conditioned because, you might see your family does that. So then that's for that. Therefore, whatever you go through that's the mechanism that you use until it doesn't work.
Yeah. And people wear it like a badge of honor. I mean, we're often recognized and appreciated for working hard, for hustling through, for being busy. It's like, oh, I'm so busy, is almost, oh, wow, look at you go, as opposed to us just as a greater society in this world seeing, hey, if we're all so strapped that we feel like we have to grind and hustle our way through it, that's a larger issue. There's a way where we could flow and within ourselves, but then just from a societal standpoint and what we decide to acknowledge and what we decide to appreciate and make the norm, hustling doesn't help us in the long run. It's a short term win, for such a long-term negative outcome with the burnout we experience from it, and with just the energy depletion, like you were saying, that can come.
Mm. So what have you learned in terms of, being someone who's come from that, who has that ethic to them? What have you learned in terms of how to flow?
Ooh, I love this question, because I think flow can be frowned upon sometimes, especially corporate world, entrepreneurs. We think we need to have it all planned out. We need to have specific schedule and the way to do things. But what I find, the number one rule I live from right now, is I always respond to flow, which means I'll have something set in my calendar. I'll have a to-do list. I'll have a meeting blocked, and a meeting with myself blocked. And if it doesn't feel aligned, if I'm not in this energy where I'm like, yes, that is calling to me right now, then I won't do it. Now, there are times when my mind tells me it's not calling to me, but my soul is saying, yeah, that's a good thing to do. So this requires a little bit of nuance, where you can know, is it just my mind wanting to sit on the couch and eat nachos all day? Or is it truly my soul saying, this isn't in alignment right now?
How do you know? Like, how do you choose?
Yeah, it's a skill. It really is. And I think the more you can create a sense of calm in yourself, the more you can tap into the soul, because I'm calling it the soul. Other people might refer to it as intuition, or that guidance inside that we have, that gut instinctual knowing, that feeling that you get. It, for me, is quiet. And so if I'm in a big hustle and bustle, if I'm in a whirlwind of energy, whether it's just being energized at a high level, or emotionally really excited or really reactive, then I'm not hearing my soul. I'm not hearing that intuition, because I'm in the hustle and bustle of my own busyness. So if I can drop below the busyness, a lot of times through exhales, deep exhales out to get out of the head, or imagining my focus behind myself looking through me, kind of that separateness, to get away from my own ego, mind, energy, it allows me to then hear myself, hear that soul wisdom, get really in touch with it.
So that sounds a lot like, I guess, doing the mindfulness practices to sort of get in tune with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you sort of implement, or what do you find that works?
So for me, I don't make decisions when I'm in really high highs and really low lows, because I know what I'll do is I'll say yes to things that I don't want to say yes to, and no to things that I might actually want to do. So that's my first kind of overarching thing I do with that. And then to help myself tap into it, it's making sure I have fun in the day, because that helps me get in a vibration where I'm able to hear myself, where I'm able to hear that intuition inside. So that helps me do it. And then also just taking a moment to really notice my environment, to refocus on that present moment, which is a theme, kind of, it seems like, from this dialogue we're having, is bringing it back to now. What am I doing right now? How am I feeling right now? Getting, like, internally noticing what's happening inside my body. One way for anyone wanting to kind of play with this that I like to do at night now, when I'm laying in bed, I just focus my attention inside. So in my body, and I notice if I have any pockets of air or tension or pain or emotions coming up. And I'll just focus wherever it is, and I'll just send it love, and I'll exhale, and I'll know that it's there to try to indicate something to me. And I don't need to know what it is right then, but I'll just focus there and focus on letting it go so it can release. And if you do this, you'll start to notice for me, it feels like a pop. It like, you feel it leave, or you feel like if you've ever got, yes. Yeah. It's a release. Like if you get a massage, you can kind of feel the pockets of air move
Yeah.
when it's a really good massage. It's sort of like that.
Mm.
And it's a way to build in that mindfulness piece.
Yeah, I love that. That's very, and it's a very intentional way that you really try and focus, I guess, on the now and raising your vibe with the fun as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of, I guess, going back to, you having with this battling with the sleep anxiety, how long until you sort of managed to find the cure for yourself as such?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I actually don't know. I don't have a specific date. It slowly trickled out. Uh, but I'm thinking it was about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't an incredibly long period of time. It was an intense chapter in my life, but it didn't last forever. And I think it's because I did so much focused work on how can I help myself with this? Because it was going to be career debilitating. I wasn't going to be able to pursue what I wanted to pursue.
Mm-hmm. I wonder how did things change? So after like that year and a half, and after you started, knowing how to manage this particular anxiety and get yourself in the now and in flow, how did life change for you?
One thing that was fascinating for me from this is I felt like I got the power of choice back. Things like I was always known for loving chocolate, to the point where when I was upset, what would I do? I'd go to the store, get a bag of M&Ms or some type of candy bar. And it was not a terrible coping mechanism, but it wasn't the most helpful. And through this process, I actually then took a whole year where I just didn't eat any chocolate. I
Mm.
just cut it out entirely. And I did that because I was reminding myself of the power that I have and the choice that I can make. And if I was able to stop the sleep anxiety, what else was I able to change? And by doing that, one, it showed me my own power over my own mind and desires, but also two, that sometimes we mask deeper things with food or alcohol or whatever it
Yeah.
might be for you. And I was able to see some of the insecurities that I had and around body image, around my own sense of self-worth and what I could do. And taking away my vice of chocolate, what are you left with when you don't eat the thing that makes you feel good? Well, you're
Mm.
left feeling pretty bad
Yeah, it's
because
like
you
a
don't have.
withdrawal or like caffeine or
Yes.
just something like, or even like for I'm just thinking now for little babies who are like they get into that habit of having the dummy put in every time they cry to self-soothe, and that's
Yeah.
a vice for them. So as like as we get older, we also have different vices where we automatically turn to for self-soothing. So this is what you're talking about now with the chocolate.
Yeah. And so it was so powerful just for me to see. And two, then for me to sit with all these emotions that I didn't even really realize I had and process through them and release them. I became very emotional. And I would say to this day, I have more access to my emotions than I ever used to. I remember I didn't cry on my wedding day, which isn't that big of a deal. But for me at the time, I thought that was terrible. I should be more emotional. And fast forward to now, I let myself feel in a way that I didn't before because I know that I can handle it. I think before I thought the emotions were going to take over and I would lose
Mm.
me, but I
Like the
know now,
weakness or something, like if you let your
yeah,
emotions take over.
yeah. And like I was going to drown in them, but now I know I've got my own back and it's okay to feel. And I let myself feel and go down to the depth of the sadness. But also that means up to the depth of the bliss too, that you can cut yourself off from.
Mm. That's the thing, isn't it? Is that it provides contrast. It's like the deep. I see life as in duality in terms of there's always going to be the highs and the lows. There's always
Yeah.
going to be the beautiful and the ugly. But it's like the degree of like how far you go in each direction or how extreme it is determines how far you go in the opposite direction. So I think what you're saying was that the fact that you allow yourself to be extremely sad or whatever the negative emotion or the low point is how high then you can really feel the bliss as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what allows us to do that, one, like you said, is knowing the contrast and what the whole human experience that creates for us. And two, it's knowing underneath the emotions, which is like the physical human expression of us, there's the energy of peace. I don't think of peace as an emotion in the same way. I think of it almost like who we are at that soul energetic level underneath it all is always fine. That part of us isn't in duality. It's in the oneness, and it's in this place of connection, and it knows it's okay. So even when I'm sobbing in my bed or screaming with glee, it's okay. I know always underneath it all, everything is okay. That part of me knows it, which is we all have that in us. We can get disconnected from it, but when we can remember that, then even when we're in pain, there can be a sense of comfort with ourselves.
Yes. I love that. That's sort of having that happy medium, I guess I call it, the happy medium, or that point of knowing that you're never too far from being grounded or your center or your focus, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting point. Like, is there a way to be grounded and at a very high and low at the same time? And I feel like there is. I feel like you can be ungrounded and very happy or very sad. And that means you're kind of at the whim of wherever you're at, but you also could be grounded knowing you're letting yourself have the experience. Something for us to just play with.
But interesting. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of I'm just still pondering on that. When you say it is okay, it's very, like, when I hear it, it's very liberating, because I guess for people who are high achieving or people who do like to hustle, there's a lot of times, there's a lot of problems that you can get yourself into, and then it's a lot. So how do you, I guess, manage like these days in terms of the work you do or the people that you help? What does that look like, or what does that feel like to you now?
Yeah, well, one thing that I do for myself, and then also I help my clients do, is set up an agreement with themselves for when they mess up, whether it's unintentional, they try something out and it fails, or they don't follow their plan, whatever it might be, to always have an agreement with themselves that they're not going to beat themselves up. They're not going to deny love for themselves, that they have their own back, even when they fall flat on their face. And it creates this inner trust to where it doesn't matter what happens to you, and almost to the point where you kind of look for things to go bad so you can use it to show yourself how you are still there for you. You have your own back, and every opportunity where you really put yourself out there and it doesn't work is your chance to say, I'm not making this need to mean anything about me. I'm not using this to beat myself up. I know that I have my own best interests at heart. I know that I'm going to support me through this.
So that's like having trust when you're saying that, having your own back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of you mentioned something about the failing side of things, like, looking for those opportunities to, I guess, in a sense, fail, or to find out, what's the limits here before, and then getting feedback from that. Because a lot of people have that fear of failure. I know that I have myself as well. It's something that, and even a lot of my clients do as well. So how do you sort of relearn or rewire that to, because naturally when we don't want to look for those opportunities to fail or to give ourselves like feedback. So it's very scary to be able to, try something new or like do something a different way. Yeah. So, what's your way of dealing with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have not found a way to program out of fear to the point where I don't have fear. I maybe that's possible. I haven't figured that out. So instead of focusing on trying to program out of the fear, I change what I make fear mean. So fear means I'm really pushing myself. Fear means, okay, am I physically safe right now? If yes, great. This is an opportunity to grow. Fear means forward. Fear means underneath the fear, there's always wisdom. Fear means it's like this because it wants me to know something. It's there to guide me, but it doesn't have to be the thing that makes the decision.
Yeah. So you're really giving it a new meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the meaning, one of the things I learned as well is that the meaning that you give is the meaning that you live. So whatever it is that you're experiencing, it's like, if you put two people in that category, two people facing the same event, but one person like yourself might give it a meaning that it means forward. So you will take the plunge, but the other person might mean that, oh my God, I'm going to die. As well.
Yes.
Like, and then therefore they don't. So it's really dependent on, I guess, a lot of different factors as to like what is the real situation and what's the truth of it as well.
Yeah. And if we were to ask ourselves what we're afraid of, pretty much what would happen over and over, if it was a speech or if it was an interview you had coming up or a new product you were launching, if you ask yourself why enough, oh, why are you afraid of that? Or why that? Oh, why that? It would always come back to a fear of dying. Because that's the ultimate fear.
Yeah.
And so we know we're going to die no matter what. And if that's the ultimate thing underlying all this fear, we can't avoid it. So we might as well just.
You have to go through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any, I guess, what are the things that people should ask themselves or be in tune with when they do face those new obstacles or uncertainties within their life?
Yeah. So first, I do, just from a safety standpoint, always want people to ask, am I physically safe? Like, is my life in danger in this moment? Yes or no kind of thing. Yeah. Or maybe. And if it's yes or maybe, don't do any mindset stuff. Get yourself out of that situation. But if you slow down and ask, most of the time, pretty much all the time now in how we live, it's a no. It's so then, it's just your brain making up a story about something to happen that could happen. And if you can know, even if the worst happens, tomorrow will come, as much as we know it will, and I'm going to have my back regardless, then it's okay. And one of the beliefs that I've adopted that I think really helps me to push forward is that things are happening for me, even terrible things. Because I think at the human level, it seems terrible, but at the energy level, energy isn't in duality in the same way. So it's always happening for us. We just don't know why. And we don't need to know why. But if we believe it's happening for us, then even if we fail and we lose that client or that job, okay, maybe this leads to something better. Maybe this gives me a new insight that'll help me connect with people in a different way. Maybe this takes me down a whole new track. Like sleep anxiety for me, I mean, this isn't the most dire of situations, but at the time it felt quite terrible. And I didn't know how it could be great for me. But if I can let myself see the possibility, I know now what that led me to was so much compassion and understanding for other people experiencing anxiety, whether it's about sleep or other areas. And so it helped me to build a bridge to help other people. So there's always a way that it can help us.
I love that, because it's something that I've, retrained my mind to think as well, because it's very easy to go into victim mode where you're like, oh, why is this situation happening to me? Why did this relationship not work? Or like this job opportunity, they said no. Like there's a lot of, there's a lot of no's and there's a lot of negativity. And I find that when you get the negativity or that feedback, that actually impacts you more than when something positive happens. Like there's
Yeah.
some ratio of like when someone says something or something negative happens, it's like it takes 7 times the amount of positive to reinforce, to get you back into neutral, something like that.
I've heard the same 7-to-1 ratio. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I guess, in the time when you're in the situations, you think, wow, like this is happening. I've gone to this car accident and it's happening to me right now. But I guess from what you're saying, when it's happening for you, it's like having that different perspective, maybe even a higher zooming out of the situation to see what are the lessons that can be learned within this.
Yeah. And I think when you're in the moment, like when you're in the middle of the car crash, you're probably not wondering, oh, how is this working for me?
Yeah.
At that time, I would just go to compassion for myself. I wouldn't, like, your brain might want to beat you up for the way you drove or something like that. Just compassion back to yourself. Compassion. That seems to be the key, I think, for most things. Because if you can be on your own team, then at least you within yourself are supporting you.
Mm.
And that way you have some sense of grounding in yourself. So compassion in the moment can be the way. And then maybe in the moment, you'll start to see how it could help, but maybe you won't. Maybe you need some distance or space if it's a car
like
crash or
yeah.
Cause I think what happens too is we use positivity as a way to try to not feel bad. We'll try to paint our way through things, but that implies basically a fear of feeling bad. So we do have to let ourselves experience the negative as kind of a positive in a way as well, because it gives us some sense of clarity or understanding.
Yeah. I just want to ask you something on that, but before we do, the compassion side of things, being the key to, especially for in moment situations that might be negative. How does someone actually have self-compassion? Like, what are the things that, you say to yourself or you have to do to know that you're in compassion mode rather than like beating yourself up, which is like quite automatic for some people?
Yeah. And I can so relate to that too. What I offer to people suffering with this, the first thing I like to have people do is write a love letter to themselves. And what this looks like is, imagine you're talking to a dear friend, but the dear friend's you, and you write it to yourself, like, dear Lisa, I just want you to know how much I love you. You're so appreciated. I know things didn't go the way you wanted them to go today, but know that we are here. We love you. So you just write to yourself this love letter. And I did it for 30 days straight. And the first day it felt really silly and hokey, and I was rolling my eyes at myself. But by day 5, day 10, I would think like, this secretly feels really good, but I'm still going to pretend that I don't love it. By day 20, by day 30, you're feeling the love. You're seeing it. And you can even read it aloud to yourself so you can hear the words out loud.
Or affirm it. What about, let's say, take it back to the situation where I feel like a lot of people might experience, like, you've got a big presentation tomorrow, there's a lot of people counting on you to deliver whatever result. How do you be self-compassion when you are under that kind of pressure?
Yeah, it's knowing even if you black out or you forget your words, the next day you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to support yourself. It's also compassion for you, also gives you the grace of giving everyone a sense of compassion. So for a presentation, it's remembering they're not focused on you the way you're focused on you. They want the information. You have the same goal. They're not there to take you down. So it's creating compassion or trust in others as well. Because we're in this world together, whether it's a presentation or a project that you're working on or something you're launching. If you can have trust in the other side and whoever's receiving your message or your product or your goods, if you can trust that, then you don't feel like you're going to battle. You can lower your guard a little bit, love on yourself and love on them.
Mm. Yeah, because it's like the way that you show up, it allows other people to show up in that way, in a sense as well. So like if you're trying to be all perfect, and then let's say like, you know, you might stuff up or whatever it is, but you having a laugh about it or being okay with it allows other people to be okay with it too, because they're like, well, you're just human, and I'd probably be the same in your position, or, you know, like I think, yeah, whereas like if you're really trying to put it on and be perfect, and then like when you stuff up, you're like beating yourself up in that moment, other people feel that energy too, and they're like, oh well, that person, you know, can clearly see that that's happening and they really stuffed up, like, you know, it's like what you project is what you get back.
Yeah. And what they project on you is based on them. So that might help people as well. If they think poorly of you, it's coming from their own thoughts about what they think. It doesn't actually have to mean anything about you. You don't have to take it on if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of check in with yourself and say, okay, did I really do a bad job? Does that feel true to me? Or is that just their perspective on something?
Yeah, because a lot of people, I guess, from the mental plane have different filters, you know, from the past and all of these things. Think of it like an Instagram filter or whatever it is that makes sense for people.
Yes.
But, you know, they have, like, when we're talking about projections, it's like whatever that you've experienced or like judgments that you have is just going through a certain filters within yourself. And so I guess the person who's receiving it, they also have different filters. So it's up to them whether they, you know, want to take that on within themselves or just treat it as what it is, which is just these thoughts or these judgments are going through the other person's filters based on their experience of their life and things that they've gone through.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There was something that you mentioned before that was like really interesting. What's your view on when you said like people who are trying to be positive, you know, like when something bad happens or you're like, it's okay, like it's that kind of, I don't know, it's like fake positivity, or like you're trying to be positive in a situation when, you know, let's say someone's died and you're like, it's okay, like I'm strong, and you know, like you're self-affirming, trying to be positive when in fact potentially you're not okay, you know, and not allowing yourself to express that side, that vulnerability. I'm just wondering, like, what's your view on like that situation, or like positivity, because there's like this there's also this culture or like this toxicity that comes with trying to be positive all the time as well.
Yeah. So I'm all about genuine positivity. And I think kind of what you were just talking about is there's a frantic positivity where we're trying to force on a feeling because we're not feeling like we can cope with feeling bad. So we try, it's almost like a denial. We can use positivity to deny what's truly how we're feeling in a situation. But if we deny it, it doesn't go away. It stays in us. It just shows up in other ways. It's like repression of an emotion. It'll come up somewhere else. You'll be highly triggered by another event. It's still in you. So you don't ever really escape it. You got to let yourself process how you're feeling in the moment. And so from the difference of a genuine positivity versus kind of like that fake positivity is you're in your truth. You can think, okay, things really suck right now, and that's how I'm feeling. Maybe I won't always feel this way. And if that phrase feels true to you, that has a glimmer of genuine positivity to it. So you're not trying to force your way into a mindset. You're using truth, what feels true to you, to get there. So, okay, this situation sucks right now. but maybe in the future, it'll feel a little better. And then you might think, okay, yeah, actually I've been in a similar situation in the past and it didn't feel so bad. Okay. And that's you accepting where you're at and allowing there to be some relief. You know, it's I can see how tomorrow this could all blow over. And you just kind of build yourself up, but allowing yourself to feel how you're feeling in each instant.
Yeah. So it's very much about that self-acceptance, or accepting what is, rather than being in denial of it.
Yeah.
Or making it something else it's not.
Yeah.
That's really liberating. Like when you can actually accept what happened to you, or whatever it is that you're feeling, once you can accept it and acknowledge that it's there, then you're really giving yourself, I guess, that power back to then feel, I guess, the difference between that situation and another situation, because you're feeling it at each level rather than like trying to suppress it and then it sort of coming up or manifesting in other areas of your life.
Yeah, you're in touch with yourself when you do it that way. That's the genuine positiveness. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Now I don't even know where we are, because we are
we're just going.
We have gone so in some other direction here. One thing that's come up that I'd love to ask you is about imposter syndrome, and that's where it's like sort of when you're faking it, or feeling like a fraud in certain situations. I know that might, that's something I felt before, and a lot of people who are doing something new or trying something on for the first time may feel like that in certain situations. So do you have any sort of advice or things that worked for you in terms of, how to deal with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think one thing that I like to do is remind myself that it doesn't have to be a syndrome. It's a moment. When we say syndrome, and it isn't even in the DSM, which is how psychologists would diagnose people with different disorders or different things they're experiencing. Imposter syndrome isn't in there. So it's not, we don't have to give it this label. And when we make it into a syndrome, we're dragging every past experience with us, saying, this is how we're taking like the collection of all of the times we felt low or like a fraud before, lumping it all together and carrying it with us, saying, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm an imposter. I feel like a fraud. I have imposter syndrome. So I like to let people, and myself as well, let go of that bag. It's not a syndrome. It's a moment. It's a thought and a feeling in that instance. And maybe it's based on what happened in the past, but we don't need to bring the past into it right now. We can just focus on where we're at now. And if we're experiencing a thought or a feeling that makes us feel like a fraud or like an imposter, I let myself know it's just showing my own self where I have room to grow, where I still have work to do, where I can own my own part in whatever's going on. Because the way the research world talks about imposter syndrome is that you're not acknowledging your own accomplishments and successes. So then it seems like what you need to do is you need to own your own accomplishments and successes. So you have to help yourself see that, but that definition isn't going to work for somebody who would have imposter syndrome, because it requires that the things that you're not acknowledging. You'd have to acknowledge what you're not acknowledging to even make that definition resonate.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a funny joke.
Yeah, it's very much like sort of the opposite. That's how you would sort of treat it from what you're saying, is like, yeah, because you're not acknowledging where you're at or the stage or the progress that you've made. And so then you pretty much, if you acknowledge it, then that you don't have to put a label on it as to like saying that you're fake, because you're being authentic or genuine about your progress.
Yeah.
And maybe the things that you're still working on.
Yeah, that is great that you're highlighting that, because sometimes we think the whole entire project needs to be complete to acknowledge, but we can acknowledge the actions that we've taken. We don't have to have the end outcome or goal. We can see the little things we've done along the way. It kind of relates to what we were saying earlier about the negative versus positive feedback. We want to give ourselves positive feedback that we can genuinely see what we've done. And we don't have to own the whole experience. We don't have to say, I created this project if it feels like you had 5 other team members help you. You don't have to try to tell yourself you did something that doesn't feel like you really did it. You can say, I did this part. I did this. Yes, my team helped, but this is the part that I contributed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you say own, because own has come up multiple times in this conversation, and sometimes it's easier to just say it rather than actually do it as well. But I guess practically, in a practical sense, how do you own yourself wholly, or own whatever it is that you're, where you're at, and trust?
Ooh, that is a great question. I haven't thought about it that way before.
Yeah. Well, what do you do? Like, in terms of how do you go about owning, like, that you're going to own this project or this situation or you?
Yeah. One of my favorite questions to ask is, what's my part? Because, so I'm a coach, so I'm working with clients. I can't make somebody have a transformation or a breakthrough but my mind will try to tell me I can, that I'm the one, but I'm not the one. They need to do their work. My part is showing up. My part is seeing what they're doing and helping them to see their own mind. My part is pointing out the blocks that they're having. My client's part is to show up and to respond, and they have their own role. So if I ask myself, what's my part? It clears up for me what I am not supposed to own, because sometimes we think we're supposed to do it all.
And you might even want to start thinking that, you're going to, like, if people start, as a coach, I'm just thinking, like, if people start telling you their stories as well, and then you might even own some of it because you take it on, that could be detrimental to how you're showing up and what you're doing for, like, in terms of your part.
Yeah, because once you start owning their stories, you're no longer in a clean mindset or clear space to be able to be objective, because you're no longer separate from it. You're attached to it, just like your client. So now you're in the same kind of place that they are. Who's coaching who?
Yeah.
So I say that with love, because I can completely relate to what you're saying. It's, how can we own what's ours to own, separate from what somebody else's is?
How would that, I'm just curious, this is coming up, but how would that apply to, like, I mean, let's say, like, if, I don't know, you've experienced this and, we can blow over it, but the owning side of things, that can get pretty complex in terms of, like, if you're in a relationship, for example, or you have certain connections with the work that you do or something, that, you might feel like, well, I own, I don't know, this particular part of the relationship or whatever it is, or I deserve this because I worked for this kind of thing. That can kind of be very conflicting, as well, as to, like, it gets blurred as to, like, well, what do you own?
Yeah. Oh yes. So what I would think with the relationship, and whether it's a significant other or others, or a work relationship of some sort, you own the way you think about it, what you choose to make that mean, which often creates then feelings within you, and what you do, your actions, and they own that for themselves, but together you own the result. So like, if a client has a transformation, I can see the part I played and the part that they played, the things I did and the things they did to make it kind of come together for some type of results. But I didn't make it. They did their part. They made it for them, and I did my coaching. So in a relationship, you could think, even like from a money standpoint, if you share a bank account together, you share that account. you each contributed in different ways. Some maybe through the work that they do and actually bringing in money, others just through their support that they brought to the relationship as well, to come together to create that. So I think this is where it gets sticky, because what I think I'm kind of saying here is you don't have the result on your own. The result is a accumulation of your energy combined with all the other energy involved.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that's where it comes in, where for me, it's like that control. So like as a high achiever or whoever, if you identify with that, those kind of characteristics, when you want to be in control, or, you're part of like a collaborative or a relationship or whatever, and you start to want to be like, well, like I want things this way and I'm taking ownership and all of these things, it can be a bit much. Like if you're a real control freak. And
yes.
yeah. And that's when it can make things out of balance, because you might want to just take over, and you put a lot of energies and, like you feel like you are responsible for a lot of different things. And when the boat crashes, when the other person or the collaborative, when they don't agree, then that's when the conflict comes up. So it's like, how do you sort of, if you're someone who wants to really be in control of things and they don't, go the way you want to, is there any degree of how much ownership do you take?
Yeah. And I think so much of our suffering comes from trying to control what is not ours to control. So instead of being okay with trying to control something and it not turning out, I think it's, why do you think you are meant to control that in the first place? I think people do this with their children a lot. They want to control how their kids feel. But we can't make somebody feel a certain way. We can have our own emotion, and that energy will go out and touch the other people as we're sharing that space, but they decide whether they receive it. They decide whether they take it in.
Yeah, so key. So it's really, I think what it comes down to, if we were to be sort of give people clarity, is that the ownership is really in your thoughts and your feelings and your behavior.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, you summed that up beautifully. Yeah.
Yeah. And everything else, it's like however someone thinks of you, reacts in a certain situation, or the way that they behave towards you, that's none of, I was about to say that's none of your business. It is if you are trying to achieve a result together. Oops.
I'm here.
Are we back?
We're back.
That's all right. I can, the internet. That's right. I can edit this out.
Okay, perfect. Would you mind repeating what you said?
Yeah. Where did you get up to?
So you had just said the phrase about, to sum it all up, it comes down to our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors. I had said beautifully. And then you went on.
Oh, yes. I was just saying that however someone else's, how they think, feel, and act, it has nothing to do with you as such, except obviously if you're in a collaborative, project or a relationship, and you both own the result based on your parts. But you can't go and change the way that someone thinks, feels, and acts, because you can only own your own.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're wanting to have influence over somebody else, inspire them in some way or teach them something, then how do you do that if you can't make them learn it or feel it? Well, you embody how you would love for them to feel or think, and you share that, and that creates like an energetic vibration that you're emitting to the world. And we as people, we like to create like a harmony. And so their energy will respond to that. And it's easier then for them to access that. It's like when a baby cries, all the other babies around cry. They're all sharing that experience together. And the one baby offered it out and the others were able then to receive it, but the babies chose to receive it. You
Yeah.
could say.
Yeah. So there's always, I guess in summary, it would be like you got to lead from example in terms of if you want to sort of influence. There's many ways of influence. That's a whole nother topic. But I suppose, when you start with yourself and take ownership of, the way that you think and feel and act, then and really be able to show up as yourself and do the things that you need to do, that's when you can express your energy or be able to, I guess, influence other people through that. And it's up to them whether they want to accept it or reject it, but that's got nothing to do with you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really what it means to be the change that you seek. You be that now, you create that now in yourself, and that invites others to do the same.
Yeah. Beautiful. So come to now, in terms of your coaching, your business, like things, what are you working on these days?
So I'm working with my clients one-on-one in 6-month capacity. And then I'm also now going to be launching a group coaching program for those who really want some support and they're looking for a deep dive on a specific topic. So that program will be 1 month, but we're going to be diving into soul-filled self-confidence, how to approach confidence not just from a mental place, but from that energetic space where you're truly living and embodying your self-confidence, that comes from the soul. Mm-hmm. So that's my next endeavor. And I'm really looking forward to getting to share that and launch that as well.
Yeah. And we can drop the links in the show notes as well if anyone's interested in getting in touch with you.
Perfect.
Now, come to the last part. I always like to ask two questions. And that is, the first one is, because we're on the Journey to Fulfillment podcast, and you've gone through such a journey yourself in terms of your development. At this stage right now, what does fulfillment mean to you?
I would say fulfillment is letting it be okay to not have all the answers. And just to sit with that and trust the journey that I'm on, that we're all on.
Beautiful. And lastly, imagine that you have smashed all your goals and you've been able to impact the world in so many ways through the work that you do and through the person that you are. And then it becomes sort of your last day on earth for any sort of reason. What would be the message that you would want to send to the world or to tell other people?
I'd want people to know that they're okay. They're perfect the way that they are. And any answers that they're seeking, to look within themselves first, because they truly know what's best for them.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your time and your wisdom today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much as well.